Ed O'Neill spent over a decade embodying Al Bundy, the shoe salesman who hated his job, his life, and sometimes even his family. But what many fans never realized is how much of Ed's own story was hidden inside that character. Over the years, he has opened up about the casting process, the conflicts on set, and the scars left behind by one of television's most controversial sitcoms. The truths he has finally revealed are darker, more personal, and far more tragic than the jokes that once made millions laugh. The birth of a different kind of sitcom. When Married with Children first went into development in the mid-1980s, television was still dominated by polished images of family life. The Cosby Show reigned supreme, portraying an upper-middle-class household that was supportive, moral, and filled with life lessons. It was a template networks were eager to copy. But writers Michael G. Moe and Ron Levitt saw something false in that vision. They believed millions of Americans were living lives that looked nothing like what was on screen. Instead of comfortable houses and heartfelt speeches, there were dead-end jobs, nagging bills, failing marriages, and a deep frustration with the idea that family life was supposed to be perfect. From that idea came their project, bluntly titled Not the Cosbys. The timing was crucial. Fox had just launched in 1986 and was desperate to differentiate itself from ABC, CBS, and NBC. The established giants had no appetite for controversy, but Fox had nothing to lose. The executives were willing to gamble on a show that might not appeal to everyone as long as it made noise. Moe and Levitt handed them exactly that, a script dripping with sarcasm, crude humor, and biting social commentary. It was not about an ideal family. It was about survival in the trenches of lower middle-class America wrapped in laughter that was both uncomfortable and unforgettable. The casting process turned that script into a revolution. Ed O'Neill, a stage actor with limited recognition on television, came in for the role of Al Bundy in 1986. As the story goes, he walked into the room, collapsed into a chair, and let out a weary sigh, a gesture borrowed from one of his relatives. Instantly, the producers knew they had found their Al. O'Neill later said he was seen as the get actor, the only one with experience that gave Fox confidence, but in truth, his performance carried the weary bitterness that became the spine of the show. Katie Siegel transformed Peggy Bundy from lines on a page into a living, breathing character by showing up to her audition in a tight skirt with teased red hair and a deliberately provocative edge. Christina Applegate was only 15 when she replaced Tina Casper as Kelly Bundy after the pilot, but her mix of innocence and sly humor cemented her as the face of teenage rebellion on television. David Fino, just 12, embodied Bud Bundy with a combination of desperation and scheming energy that clicked instantly. Amanda Bears completed the picture as Marcy, the neighbor who became both foil and friend to the family. From the start, the chemistry was undeniable. None of them were stars, except perhaps O'Neill in the eyes of the producers, but together they created something bigger than any one actor. Behind the jokes about shoes, money, and marriage was something sharper, a reflection of the bitterness and disappointments that many families lived with in silence. For O'Neill, those sighs and slumped shoulders weren't only comedy. They were drawn from real life. And that authenticity buried inside the sarcasm is what made the Bundys unforgettable. The controversy that shook America. By the late 1980s, Married with Children was already pushing boundaries in ways television had never seen. The crude jokes, the dysfunctional Bundy household, and the unapologetic mockery of social norms made the show a lightning rod for controversy. But nothing compared to what happened in 1989 when the episode Her Cups Runneth Over aired. In the storyline, Al Bundy and Jefferson set out to buy lingerie for their wives only to stumble into a series of provocative encounters. What seemed like another Bundy misadventure ignited outrage across the country. In Michigan, a woman named Terry Rakolta, who happened to be the sister-in-law of the state's governor, launched a national boycott campaign. She accused the show of corrupting family values, citing the sexual innuendo, the inclusion of a flamboyant gay character, and semi-nude scenes. Rakolta mailed hundreds of letters to corporations demanding they withdraw their sponsorships. Within weeks, major brands like Gillette, Coca-Cola, and Warner Lambert cut ties with the series. For a young network like Fox, losing advertisers was a devastating blow. Executives even pulled an episode titled, "I'll See You in Court," which revolved around a lawsuit over a secretly recorded sex tape from the schedule entirely. Ed Neal later reflected on this period, admitting the pressure was overwhelming. Every line, every gesture was suddenly under a microscope. Katie Siegel described it as a time when the cast felt constantly scrutinized. Christina Applegate, still a teenager, was thrust into the role of a sex symbol almost overnight. At just 17, she became the face of the show's controversy, facing public judgment before she was even old enough to vote. Yet, the irony was undeniable. The more people protested, the more viewers tuned in. Ratings surged after the boycott, catapulting Married with Children into the national spotlight. What was meant to destroy the series ended up cementing its place in television history. Neal would later admit that controversy became part of the brand and part of the burden each cast member had to carry for the rest of their careers. Behind the laughter, scars, and tragedies on set. For the millions who tuned in each week, Married with Children looked like pure comedy. But behind the laughter were stories of pain, loss, and deep resentment that left lasting scars. Ed Neal has admitted that the environment on set was far from warm. In fact, cast members often described the atmosphere as brutally honest to the point of cruelty. Katie Siegel once said, "You weren't safe. If you turned your back, somebody was going to talk trash about you." Christina Applegate later revealed she had overheard fellow cast members criticizing her through the stage monitor just minutes after leaving the set. These moments weren't just hurt feelings. They reflected the darker side of a production that thrived on sarcasm and cynicism, both on screen and off. Applegate, who was still a teenager when the series began, confessed years later that the pressures of being sexualized on national television triggered a long struggle with anorexia. She kept it hidden, sneaking into bathrooms or even airplane restrooms just to eat in secret. "I was in such a dark space," she admitted, describing how shame and fear haunted her, even off camera. The tragedies didn't stop there. In 1991, Katie Sagal was 7 months pregnant when she suffered a devastating stillbirth. The pregnancy had already been written into the show's storyline, and writers were forced to rewrite the arc into a dream sequence for Al Bundy. Sagal later said it was the hardest period of her life, returning to work and delivering Peggy's sarcastic lines while privately grieving a loss that nearly broke her.